Welcome to the Mental Fitness Podcast. Today's entrepreneurs are mental athletes that have to know about the mind and how to keep it fit. Our goal is to increase our resilience against stress and anxiety, optimize our productivity, motivation, and optimism by learning about the human mind through psychology, neuroscience, and human behavior. I'm your host Ozan. I'm a founder who has experienced the challenges of launching and growing a business and a keen student of human behavior over the last 15 years. I'll share with you what I know and learn. Hundreds of impactful, behavior-changing ideas are waiting to be discovered by us. Let's begin now. Hello and welcome to the Mental Fitness Podcast for Entrepreneurs. I'm your host Ozan, and today's topic is a controversial one, to put it mildly. It's toxic hustle culture. So what I mean, what is meant by hustle culture? If you have not heard the term before, it is this idea that is put forward by the likes of Gary Vaynerchuk, among many others, in which the biggest quality of an entrepreneur is that they hustle endlessly. They run from place to place. They do task after task, and they really push themselves. So it is quite the opposite of the work-life balance. So hustle culture, when you think about it, think the opposite of work-life balance in a way. So that's what it actually makes me think of. And I think I position hustle culture specifically in this way. Not that there aren't any people who actually find a good way to balance while still hustling, but most of the time when people talk about the fact that entrepreneurs need to hustle, they mean it's a 12, 14 hour work days, 60, 70, 80 hour work weeks, working over the weekend, and staying late until night, etc. So that type of a culture. And the ideology that goes with this is, if you are not up for the hustle, then you don't deserve to be successful, and there is a good chance you will not be successful. So that's kind of the ethos that goes with this hustle culture. I think personally that it is toxic. And before I get into the details of why it is toxic and how we can avoid that, let me just sidestep for a moment and share with you why I have some exposure to this topic. My area of study has been sociology, psychology, and human behavior. So understanding the human mind just as a atomic unit from the point of view of psychology, and then going into the group dynamics through sociology, looking at companies, looking at company cultures, organizations, even at the national level. So that's what I've been focusing on. And for that particular reason, I have a quite rich data set of examples and anecdotes and stories and instances that I can refer to mentally to think about the potential effects. I personally worked in a company that had this hustle culture really embedded in its bones, and worked in companies that did not. And what I can say for sure is that the hustle culture can be toxic, because it is essentially a product of an uninformed thought process about what it means to be human, what it means to be in a group as an individual. So what it comes down to is the people who advocate the hustle culture really have a very limited, almost nascent understanding of how humans work. They're ignorant. So that's the short version. Ignorant people are the ones who are really promoting that hustle culture, and I'll convince you why that is. First of all, it has to do with systems thinking, right? And systems thinking is a particular approach of thinking about things, and this can be the engine of a car, it can be a company, it can be a country, it can be a building where people organize, and it can be a group of a non-profit group and everything else, and also the human being itself is a system. It's a very integrated system that has the physical, the psychological, and the social component, and they all together come, and there is incredible complexity in that, and that actually means we can both have a certain amount of free will mixed with responsibility. This is something we've talked about in the previous podcasts. And also we can also function as an individual as well as within a system, within an organization, and within a society. So that's why without systems, we are lost, right? Everything depends on systems. And when you think about your body and your mind as a system, then immediately something becomes very, very clear. And it is this. This system has inputs, it has outputs, and it manages resources. So these are the characteristic qualities of most systems. Systems have inputs, they have outputs, and then they have an internal system whereby they manage resources. So because we are a system, just like the other ones, the ideal approach is to try to optimize for the system. It is not to so imagine you're driving a car and like you're pedal to the metal, full throttle, and like this is if this is so advocating the hustle, the endless hustle is just like a rally driver, a novice rally driver, giving advice that you should put your foot pedal to the metal and go as fast as you can. Well, what's gonna happen if you do that? I'll tell you, there are a few alternatives. First, you might crash because you need to take your foot off the pedal and you need to brake sometimes just to keep you in the lane and really be able to turn around that corner. The second thing, you will just mess up the engine of the car if you just keep it at 9,000 RPM endlessly. You're just gonna break the engine. And it's very similar. If you understand the system, which is the car and which is the engine, then the same thinking principle applies for you humans. The only difference is we are much more complicated, and that's actually a reason why we need to be much more careful about managing the resources of this system, not the opposite, which is to neglect that this is a system and it has a lot of components. I think the best example for this as a way of thinking is think about the world and think about the current capitalist system in which we live. Like the idea, especially the American logic at least, but it's also shared by a lot of nations around the world, is that the natural world is an endless resource, and it is seen as something that is permanent, that is unextinguishable. So we depend on fossil fuels, we depend on oil, natural gas, and all of these things, and like cut down the forests. And yes, nature is resilient, but it is not an endless resource. There is a cost to everything, and it is very similar like to that. If we the fact that we did see nature as an endless resource and depleted the fossil fuels, huge carbon emissions, means that we are at the edge and perhaps past that point of a huge environmental disaster. And it is it's very similar, almost the exact blueprint of that with your body and with your mind. So as an entrepreneur, if you see your body as the capitalist system sees the natural world as an endless resource to be exploited and depleted without seeing it as a system and respecting its dynamics, if you look at your body the same way, and like hence the argument, right? It is the same system and same way of thinking that exploits the natural world that advises this hustle culture, the way you exploit your body. So if you look at your body like that, you will deplete the resources of your body and of your psychology, and the cost, I promise you, will be disastrous. And it will be disastrous in ways you may not guess. Like there's the physical component. The average lifespan might decrease, early age death, a lot of stress-related illnesses, muscle, spinal, and neural systems damage, because like hustle means you tense up also because there's a good amount of stress. You don't have enough time for exercise, for relaxing. You don't have enough time for culture and for social life and for friends. So these all add up, right? And in terms of the psychological level, you have the anxiety, you have the fear, which culminate in higher overall resting heart rate, and most importantly, higher overall blood pressure, BP. And BP, the high blood pressure, is seen as the silent killer it leads to many diseases. And on top of that, you're more irritable. You get angry quicker. You get into easy fights with others. And I think the last but the most important one is you lose good, valuable, nurturing, irreplaceable relationships in your life when you neglect people. And I cannot stress this enough. Imagine you have a friend who you had kept in touch with last 10, 15 years, and you are at a time in your life where you're hustling for your business and it's the most important thing to you. And believe me, I do get it. Like I'm in a very similar spot. And but if you neglect your friends, if you don't call them for 2 years, 3 years, because it's not going to take 6 months to build a big business, then what means is you have lost something that is irreplaceable. And I think it really does hurt you in the long run. So that's the core idea that I wanted to share with you. I think the hustle culture is toxic because it's not based on a systems thinking model. Just as the current capitalist ideology does not see nature as a resource to be optimized, but a resource to be exploited, that exact blueprint of thinking is directed towards how you as an individual, as an entrepreneur, should spend your life, and that dictates the hustle culture. If you see yourself, your body and your mind and your psychology in a system thinking world, the way you look at this will change. And how does it change? And this is something I try to practice personally, purposefully as well. And it is something that I do. It is the ethos of work hard, play hard. And this is only possible if you think in terms of not in time, but in terms of the total creative and productive energy output you have. So imagine you're trying to create a grid of how you allocate your time to different tasks throughout the 24-hour cycle. 8 hours for rest, 8 hours for work, 8 hours for entertainment. So that seems to be like a very clear blueprint. But the problem with that is actually immediately apparent, and it is that if you spend 8 hours a day for rest, and I think you should at least do that, and you should at least spend that time to sleep. And if you're not convinced, if you want to be a better problem solver, if you want to remain calm, if you want to make better decisions, and if you want to live longer, I would urge you to adapt yourself to getting at least an 8-hour sleep a night. This is more important if you're an entrepreneur. And if you're not convinced, please do check out the book by Matthew Walker, Why We Sleep. It's going to convince you, I think. But anyways, which leaves you with 8 hours for work and 8 hours for entertainment. Now, as an entrepreneur, the lines between what is fun and what is interesting versus what is work gets muddled a lot. So looking your 24-hour in terms of 3 brackets, 8 hours for each, is not the worst way of looking at it, because it brings a certain sense of structure and certain sense of time, and I try to do that to a certain extent. Like personally, what I try to do is for every day, even if I have a meeting or not, even if it's a very busy time or not, like the beginning of the workday for me is 8:30 a.m. every day. Every weekday at 8:30 a.m. my work starts. And I work as an entrepreneur for the last 5 years, but of course my entrance to my initiation in the work life has started in a corporate organizations, and I thought that was a good structure, so I stuck with that. And I end the day at 6 p.m. or 6:30 p.m. And that's not a bad window. It's like almost nine hours of possible net work that you can get done. But the limit there is like, it guides me to start work at 8:30 a.m. and finish work at 6:30 or 6 p.m. And I like mentally categorize any time after 6:30, 7 p.m. In the evening as me time, as entertainment time, as rest time, and the same other than Sunday afternoons. I see most of the Friday afternoon, the Saturday and the Sunday morning as me time, as entertainment and rest time. But other than that, this gives me a structure. But what matters is, like, there's a better way of actually thinking about this rather than thinking in these time chunks. Yes, there are guides, but the best way of the highest quality way of thinking is looking at the resource and the output potential I have as a system according to the task. So if I were a carpenter and if I had to use my physical muscles alongside my mental creative energy and so on, and if I get a really sore ankle after or like have like this tennis elbow or like a wrist injury potentially if I work more than 6 hours a day, then the limiting factor for me as a system in terms of my output, if I was a carpenter creating products like wood products and so on, it would be 6 hours a day. So even if I had the ability to work 10 hours a day, like my limiting factor is 6, otherwise I'll injure myself and the next day I will not be even able to work for 6 hours. So that's the limiting thing. Now, because entrepreneurs are in most of the time in some kind of a creative industry, and what I mean by a creative industry is you don't have to be an ad agency, you don't have to be working in the arts. What I mean by that is you have to be a creative problem solver. You have to really understand how tech works. You have to be able to integrate different technology tools. You have to understand some marketing, some design, some people. So there's a lot of creative problem solving and high quality, intellectually challenging decision making going on if you are to become successful as an entrepreneur. And I would go so far as to say that like 1 hour of the best version of myself as an entrepreneur is more valuable than a average version of myself which spends 6 hours, because it is just so much of what we do, success and failure, comes down to the decisions we make and the strategical direction we set for ourselves, which includes seeing market insights, market opportunities, and building on them and knowing how to capitalize on them. So because we are creative problem solvers, like the limiting factor is not our wrists, ankles, or elbows, like or the fatigue of the physical muscles, but it is the fatigue of our problem solving energy, and it's called decision fatigue. You can call it your creative energy, you can call it your Gaia, you can call it your chi, your productive energy, your daily inspirational source. Or you can also think about this in terms of the amount of time you can psychologically stay in a state of flow. And what I mean by flow is precisely what was meant by Mikhail Csikszentmihalyi when he talked about it, like that state where you are 100% concentrated on what you're doing, and the state that you lose track of time. So think in terms of not time, but in terms of your creative and productive energy, and that is for me individually about 6 hours a day, and I would say like 6 hours is even stretching it. I would say it's between 5 and 5.5 hours. Like that's what I got. I know myself, and I have worked in a very difficult environments where I had to work 14-hour, 15-hour days as well, and I can do that if the work is repetitive and it's not really creative and there isn't much decision going on. Like it sucks. It's really miserable. But what you're doing is collating an Excel report, then yeah, why not? You'll make some mistakes, but you can soldier on in a way and work for 12, 13, 14 hours and even longer. But if you want to build a consistent performance over 6 months, 9 months, 24 months, then you cannot do that. Like it's not a systems way of thinking. Just like we have brought the environment to the brink of disaster, what you will do is exactly the same with your body. You'll bring your body and psychology to the brink of disaster if you do not see it as a system, and if you do not respect the output potential it has, particularly specific the topic you have in mind. So that's it for today. Hope this was useful to you, and if you have enjoyed this one, please feel free to get in touch with me through Ozzie, OZZIE, at startupsoflondon.com. And I would love to hear about what are some challenges you have, and I'll try to mention them in the future episodes of the podcast. So if you have any questions, anything that you have a difficult time in understanding, anything you'd like me to talk about more, please send me a message, even just to say you have listened to this episode, and I'll try to focus on the things that are really important to you. Well, that's it for today. Thank you for listening, and I'll talk to you in the next one. Bye.